Hello, everyone, again. I'm back. You're welcome, and sorry. Sorry is in the cabin right now, so he'll be back later in January. So I think tonight's theme was something around practicing freedom. That oftentimes we think about freedom as freedom from external oppression, that other people are taking our freedom. And that's definitely true. That definitely does happen, and that's valid and real in the world. But I think most of us have also had the experience of being in our own prison, being the jailkeeper of our own prisons, in our own minds, in our own hearts. And a lot of times are imprisoned by our own patterning, our own beliefs, and a lot of times we know the right thing to do or know what we want to do, but we end up doing something else. So for all of us that are privileged and fortunate enough to live in a country that does afford us a lot of freedoms externally, it's good to have a community like this where we get to practice the inner work so that we can have the freedom from even ourselves. And so being at the monastery, this is a consistent theme for me. Noticing the ways that I think that things are bad, or I think that I'm trapped, or I think that I don't have options or something, and really it's just my own projections or my own concerns about not wanting to talk to people, or not wanting to address issues straight on, or not really wanting to look directly at whatever is happening. Oftentimes over the years, it's funny because residents would come up to me and say, I'm having a problem with so-and-so about this and that. And 9 times out of 10, I would say, that's really good. Maybe you should just share this with that person. I think that would be the thing to do. We're here to practice. We're here in community. I couldn't make a rule or something that favors you, but is that really what we're doing here? Why don't you just test the reality of there's what we think is happening, there's our perception of what's happening, there's our interpretation of what's happening, and then there's actually somewhere in between their perception, interpretation, and my perception, interpretation, there's something else happening in between there. And it can feel really vulnerable to really go there because it's easy to get hurt. Sometimes our interpretations are correct and it's not safe. But when we're in a trustworthy relationships and trustworthy community, it's good to be able to practice this. And by practicing it, we gain more and more freedom. In the email, I referred to this topic about renunciation as well. It's interesting to me that a lot of times being at the monastery or doing this kind of practice where we're always kind of focusing on whatever our meditation object is, it feels like we're losing a lot of other things for some reason. And it feels like we shouldn't lose things. I want to keep things. I want all the good things, and I don't want the bad things. But for some reason, when we practice learning how to concentrate, we focus on one thing and not other things. And I remember years ago being in Boston, and similar group to this, there was a, sort of like me, there was a student teacher talking about how his teacher had told him to focus on renunciation. And for most of us, I think in our culture, when we hear the word renunciation, we think that's a bad thing. That's like something that people did in the Middle Ages because there wasn't enough food or something. And now we live in a time of economic prosperity. We don't need to renounce. We just need to distribute evenly. We just need to distribute the wealth evenly, and everyone can have a lot. And there's a lot of good to be said about that, but there's also a lot of good to be said about learning how to let go of things, learning to live with less, learning to find contentment and joy without needing to have things. And the way Soryu often puts it, which I rebelled against in the first year, I remember. Something like when we're really desiring something and we get it, really check and see, is the happiness coming from getting that thing, or is the happiness coming from no longer having that obsessive, compulsive feeling of I need this thing? Is it just a temporary relief from an addiction, thinking I need this food, or I need to watch this movie, or I need to be with this person or something? Am I actually enjoying experiencing that thing, or am I actually, what I'm really enjoying is the relief from no longer thinking I don't have it and I need to have it? And it was interesting because I remember in the first year, in a lot of ways we sort of give up, the residents give up a lot of sensory indulgences. We have sort of similar food each day of rice and soup and salad. We're in a strict schedule. We're not watching TV and stuff, and we're not just like able to like go and hang out with friends whenever we want. So in a lot of ways, we're sort of like not able to indulge in a lot of ways. And so the one way that we would used to indulge my first year was we would often in our free time drive to get really crappy food, like Chinese food or pizza or tacos or buffet. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them at once. And shameful to say that now, but funny. And I remember distinctly sometime in my first year getting a slice of pizza and thinking, I'm not really that happy eating this. And I thought maybe they changed the formula of the pizza here and it's no longer good. And so a few days later I went to another place and I was like, the pizza here doesn't taste that good either. Maybe I'm just sick of pizza now. And I went and got Chinese food and I was like, this isn't that great either. And I just went through all my list of usual places I liked going. And none of them had that thrill or enjoyment that I got early on from eating. And part of it, you could just say my taste buds changed, and my gut bacteria maybe changed from eating vegan for a long time and whatever, all that. But I think what was actually happening was that sort of like need and compulsion of these foods will be like my release valve to like indulge in something. That need to get the food just faded over time. And it no longer was like, I really need to have chocolate, or I really need to go to the city market and get those chocolate-covered pretzels or bagels with butter or something. And I was just content eating the food I was eating. And ironically enough, these days, I actually prefer the soup and grain we have versus most of the food I get in the city now. Although I really like Meyer's Bagels. If you haven't been to Meyer's Bagels, discovered that a month ago, and my favorite place in Burlington now. But it's not a compulsion. It's like I can go, I don't have to go, whatever. If I go, it's a good treat. If I don't go, that's fine. I'm happy to eat my soup and grain. And so, in a lot of ways, to me, the renunciation is actually a detox. It's sort of like, am I addicted to these things that I need them to numb or soothe or help out with some pain or suffering that I can't address directly myself? Which isn't inherently bad. It's good to find ways to soothe and care for yourself. But the question is continually training and trading up what we use so that we're less and less reliant on things that are release valve versus things that actually resolve the core cause. And a lot of times when we look at our lives, and especially in the political environment, we're not really addressing core causes, we're just addressing symptoms. And for some people, that's what's needed. Maybe it's for some people, if you're in particular distress and that's the best thing that you have at your disposal, best we can do is soothe our symptoms. But ultimately, if we have the capacity and the courage and the vulnerability, want to find other methods, community, connections, teachers, friends, techniques to actually address the causes so that we're not just working on the symptoms. And very recently, we did a retreat 2 weeks ago, and I realized during the retreat that I've realized a few times but haven't taken action on very strongly. If you're my Facebook friend, you might have heard about this. But I realized that I've been reading a lot of fiction. Each night, and a lot of times in my free time, I'd read a fantasy novel or a different novel, and it was a way for me to sort of like get my head out of whatever stress was happening that day and just like kind of like get lost in another world for a while. And in a lot of ways, I enjoy it, and in a lot of ways, it's like a very it's not that bad, you know. It's weird to say I'm like addicted to reading novels, an hour a day or something. It's not like I'm still doing my work. I'm still in relationships. It's not like I'm causing harm or anything. But I did notice in a subtle way how it was me like not wanting to address reality, and in fact, as I was getting momentum in my practice, it was kind of a way for me to like step out of that momentum and come back into like
mediocrity.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good word. Mediocrity, yeah. Back to my old patterns. And I just realized on the retreat, I should do something about this. Because I'd known about it for months. Like I have this pattern where I read late at night, and then I wake up the next morning, I'm like tired, and it's hard to practice, and I don't want to exercise, and you know, it just kind of has this cascading effect where I'm sort of stuck in this middle place. The easier thing would just be stop reading and go to sleep. And so I did that. I said, I want to set, it's not like I don't think reading is inherently evil or anything, so I'm just going to set a month. I'm just not going to read any fiction for a month. And just see if I can do that. Can I do that? It's okay to pick things up, but the question is, can I put it down? And if I need to have this thing every day, in terms of needing something, it's not that bad of a thing to need, but ultimately it would be even better if I could enjoy it for what it is, rather than enjoy it as a way to soothe or be mediocre or whatever. And so I was really working on that. And being the teacher, the assistant teacher, a lot of times we have guests and new residents and apprentices come through, and I don't know if I should say this, but a lot of people freak out when they meditate. Feels like, not everyone, but a lot of people freak out and they think, I'm gonna like lose myself. I'm like concentrating and my sense of self starts disappearing, and all this feelings and sensations and all kinds of stuff come up, and I don't know what to do, and it feels like I'm gonna like lose who I am, and I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm worried about that. And it's interesting to me is because a lot of times when I'm like really doing well are the times when I'm not really constructing a sense of self. I'm not aware of myself, you know, like a few days ago I was outside building a fire for a sweat lodge, and I wasn't like self-consciously thinking about, oh, look at me building a fire, or you know, whatever. It was just like, wow, it was just like watching the fire, and it's just a beautiful fire. And I think like 3 hours went by where very little thinking about myself was happening. I was just enjoying this fire, enjoying the stars, enjoying being outside. And I think a lot of times our most beautiful moments are these times of like self-transcendence, where we're not so preoccupied with ourselves. And I think everyone has this experience. Listening to a really good song, dancing with someone, dancing by yourself, if you're playing any sport or activity like skiing or anything, you're going into flow states. There is a sense of not really being self-conscious, not really thinking about myself, not worrying about myself, and just merging with the activity. And in a lot of ways, you could say there's like a multi-trillion-dollar business in the world about trying to change and ultimately get out of yourself, whether we drink coffee or alcohol or YouTube or meditation or yoga or all these things that we do, these activities we do to try to like either change how we're experiencing the world or to get out of ourselves in a different way. Feel more energized, feel more calm, feel more happy, whatever it is. There's a lot of us seeking these different ways of how do I not get stuck in like this prison of myself. And then vice versa, I think about the times when I'm like the most stressed, the most depressed, the most anxious, and it's all about me. Cannot worry about anyone else. Just constantly thinking about me. There's no space for other people when I'm in deep suffering, deep pain. And that's okay. It's not like I'm not trying to moralize and say that's bad. That's just how it often shows up. And talking to these people, I tell them, like, remember those times when you're really happy? And there's not much of a sense of self. And we like those experiences. And so meditation isn't like, it's leading to a place of happiness. It's not leading to a place of I'm trying to steal your identity. Your mind knows how to construct your identity back really easily. And it's had decades of practice on learning how to reform yourself. The chances that you're going to forget that is really slim. It's the thing you've practiced the most, probably. But what we don't practice is how to get out of ourselves. And people who do extreme sports or psychedelic drugs or, whatever we do, these all kinds of activities to find ways to get out of ourselves. And meditation is the practice of how do I do that in any condition, in any time, with any person, in any situation. That I can put my concentration, put my attention on something that's outside of myself. It's not about my story. It's on whatever it is, my breath, a chant, generating loving kindness, noticing body sensations, or even if you're doing a sport, if I'm playing tennis, just focusing on the ball, whatever it is. In yoga, paying attention to our posture and our breath. We're like actively practicing this muscle that the world doesn't necessarily teach you. How do we get out of ourselves? And the great joy and freedom and release that happens from that. And so it's interesting because, had so many guests come by recently and they talk about like, if I stay at the monastery, it feels like I'm going to lose everything I care about and there's other stuff I really want to do with my life. And it's like, you also came here so that you can be free of all of that, all the suffering that we carry around, finding a way to enter a place where you don't need any of that, where it's a choice, It was so nice when I did the cabin retreat earlier last winter, because there was this real sense of like my own conditioning growing up. My parents owned a small business. They owned like 3 dry cleaners. And so sometimes my parents would call me up and be like, Peter, someone didn't show up for work. We need you to work today. And couldn't really say no, because it's kind of like, well, it's our livelihood and, I care. So, okay. And I have this conditioning of feeling like I'm needed. I have to put my own needs aside to like help out with the community or the group or the family or whatever. And in a lot of ways, it's like a lot of benefits, but a lot of bad things came out of that too. And so being into the cabin retreat, it was so nice to be wanted but not needed. It was like, of course, the monastery and the residents and the community like having me around. It's a benefit for me to be around, bring important gifts, and it's a loss if I'm not around, but I'm not needed. Like everything will survive even though I'm completely gone for a few months. And that's a great place to be in, where you're wanted but not needed. And likewise, with whatever reading fiction novels or relationships or something, it's great to like really want but not need. Definition, from my limited understanding, I'm not a therapist, codependency is where you're needed. I need you. You complete me. You are the pillar in my life, and if you don't exist, I'll die. It's not a good place to be. And so we can look at anything in our life and see, I think there's actually a Christian practice I read about recently or heard about somewhere of like, what's one thing that I could temporarily, I guess they just do this for Lent or something. Oh, I should know. What's one thing that I can give up temporarily, Not as a way to like, because I'm a bad person that needs things or because I'm weak or something, but just as a practice of wanting things but not needing them. Being able to find fulfillment that's not reliant on always getting something new or even the same thing. The biggest version of this would be needing ourself, needing to constantly feel a sense of self. Who am I? What's my value? Trying to build this permanent self constantly, trying to build an identity. Ideally, we all want to get to the place where we can see there is a sense of self. There definitely is a sense of self. That doesn't ever go away. But I don't need to continually defend it or argue for it or justify it or explain it. That I do this practice called circling, it's an interpersonal meditation form. And I often say, what we're really trying to aim for is really testing. We're running an experiment. The hypothesis is, what if we're just perfectly okay being who we are right now? What if I can just be who I am right now in relationship to all of you and just be? If I'm sad, I'm sad. If I'm happy, I'm happy. It's all fair game. If you're happy, that's okay. If you're sad, that's okay. If you're confused, that's okay. You don't need to build an identity that matches what I would like or something like that. Nonviolent communication, they talked about what a beautiful world if we could all ask for what we need or want, and in exchange, everyone could also agree or disagree with meeting that request without it having to be a conflict. Well, how much freedom would be if we could all make requests and we could all equally fulfill or place our boundary with filling that request. And so in the spiritual path, what we're really trying to attain is this liberation of being ourselves rather than constructing a sense of self that's different from who we actually are right now. Realizing who we are is always changing, and oftentimes I can't actually take credit for the really good things that happen or that I do. A lot of times things are just happening through us, and we're just sort of getting out of the way and trusting that there's like this body and this life and this something that like knows how to come through. And all the self-consciousness and thinking about it and trying to manufacture it, it's just getting in the way. And so when we practice mindfulness, we're learning, how do I get out of the way? I use my conscious brain to set goals, to be a positive coach, but not a stern taskmaster or perfectionist or something. We're learning how to deprogram that side of us so that something deeper has the freedom to just be, to just do the job it knows how to learn, just like babies learn how to walk or talk. It doesn't need this constant person that's judging and assessing and evaluating, am I doing this right or wrong? It just knows how to do it. And we learn how to utilize our ego in a way that helps that process flourish and go better, rather than trying to be the one that's doing it and controlling it. It's the one that's just observing. It's just the one that's supporting. It's just the one that's helping this other mysterious thing that's not really, it's weird to call it me, because it doesn't feel like me. When I'm really in flow states, chanting, dancing, singing, programming, talking, speaking, circling, any activity, it doesn't, cooking, it doesn't feel like I'm the one doing it. I feel like something's just happening. And I can use my conscious brain to set goals, to set intentions, to help it keep it on track or something. But as soon as it starts trying to really do it itself, it's usually when things go wrong. As soon as I have the thought, wow, I'm really doing it. Wow. Usually once that, it just derails completely. Wow, I figured out the secret. Now I got it. I'm having a really powerful meditation. Now I know next time I'm going to just do this again. So I'll do this again. That's never works. Never, ever works. And it's funny because a lot of times when we practice and we go, where we actually are is, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just on faith and trust. Going to do this technique. Just going to try it. And then something happens. And rather than trying to recreate that experience, learning how do we just have the same faith and trust to just keep doing that technique. Maybe it'll lead to the same destination. Maybe it'll lead somewhere else. I don't know. But it worked last time. So let's try that. And so a lot of times this practice is just a microcosm of our lives. Can we really have that faith to just try something, surrender to whatever results happen, and like a baby, just stumble, knowing we're probably going to get it wrong a lot of times, but somewhere, each time we're failing, our bodies, our minds, our hearts, our spirit is gaining data, it's gaining experience. It's learning in this mysterious way that we can't quite capture in words or intellect. And mysteriously it just works. The more we surrender to that process, the more it works. And that surrender can be a struggle, it can also just be easy. And again, we don't need to judge that experience. We just watch it and we just try again. Just keep trying. So let's try it now.
Let's do it.
So we begin, as usual, trying to find a good posture that's relaxed, but also upright, uplifting. How we present our bodies to ourselves is a reflection of ourselves. So not for anyone else, but for your own self, have a posture that helps you both be alert and relaxed, respecting yourself, loving yourself, appreciating yourself. If you already have a practice that you have a lot of momentum with, a particular technique, feel free to just use that and just take whatever things I say as invitations to add on if you wish. But I'll say some things if you want to practice along with me. Easy way would be choose a meditation object, perhaps your breath, perhaps the sounds in the room, perhaps a certain sight in your visual field. But try to pick just one thing, one sense organ, sight, sound, feeling your breath, feeling your body. I want to choose sound for right now. I'm going to focus on external sounds, but you can choose whatever you want. And rather than trying to assess whether you're having the right experience or a good experience or bad experience, just pay attention to what it's like. You're just witnessing, aware of what is your breath like, what is the sound like, what does that carpet look like. Seeing each moment as if it was brand new, because it is. If you get distracted, that's okay. You just remind yourself your intention that for right now, you're going to focus on this one object. And if you can, try to have almost a loving attitude, a loving orientation to whatever you're looking at. So if you're following your breath, you can try to cultivate the sense of, I really love this breath. This breath is the best. I really love this breath. If you're listening to the sounds, this is the perfect sound, whatever the sound is. Just get lost in that sound as if it was a symphony or a concert. That same sort of loving, full attention, losing myself in that sound. If I'm looking at the carpet, really just getting lost in that as if it was like the most amazing painting I've ever seen. And just want to capture all the details. Whatever your object is, rather than being this neutral observer or this stern taskmaster, try to have this loving attitude like this is your beloved. This is the object of your love and adoration for this time period. if you find yourself particularly distracted, one technique you can use, optional, is just for a moment, practice taking on the identity of an expert meditator. Just imagine you've been doing this for decades. You're really good at this. You're not bad at this. You know what you're doing. And whatever experience you're having is good because you're good at this. You don't need to worry about doing it wrong because you know how to do this and you're good at this. So just take on the identity of, I'm a really good meditator. I have a lot of experience. This is exactly the experience I'm supposed to be having, whatever it is. And then just go back to your focus object, really taking on that identity of, I'm a really good meditator. Again, optionally, as you're practicing, if you want, you can also expand out and include more than one primary meditation object. So if you're paying attention to sounds, you can also notice body sensations or the breath. If you're focused on your breath, you can focus on sounds as well. And just increase your awareness, aperture. Or you can try to even focus more deeply, catch each detail of the sight or sound or the feeling. Either direction is fine, either increasing in breadth or in depth here. Again, you do this by just telling yourself you're going to try. Tell your mind, tell your body, let's try including another focus object like my breath or my sounds in the room. Or let's try to focus even more deeply on the sound. Don't try to force it or figure out how to do it. You just tell yourself, let's try this out. And then get out of the way and just watch what happens. You don't need to make it happen. You just set the intention of this is the direction I want to go. There's something else in me that will just try. Or not try. Either way, it's fine. Again, remind your body, remind your deeper self. Approach this object with awe and childlike wonder. Okay. Don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm looking at or hearing or feeling. It's just so amazing, so new, so different. Wow. And you can't force wonder. You just set the intention. What if we approach this with like childlike curiosity, childlike wonder, childlike awe? And whatever happens is fine. Just set the intention. So we'll take about a 5-minute break to use the bathroom or stretch or get some water. During this time, try to keep presence with what's here right now and see if you can keep that loving attitude of whatever you're paying attention to or whatever you're doing. So, a well-known method that people talk about is fake it till you make it. And I think this actually works because what's happening is we're trying something different, and what we do has an impact. How we think impacts what we do, and what we do impacts how we feel and think. And so, oftentimes on the spiritual path, we're trying to realize these spiritual truths, to realize and experience these transcendental truths. Like Christianity would be like love is at the heart. In Buddhism, everything is impermanent, there's no self. And a lot of times we think that we have to somehow miraculously just realize these. But these are also truths that we can practice. Just like we're practicing freedom right now from ourselves, we can also practice these spiritual truths. So, everyone's been doing a good job so far, and if this is working for you, or you're doing a technique that works for you, keep going. Just get lost in whatever technique you're doing. But another option, if you wish, is we can practice taking on this different view, these spiritual views. So if you find yourself distracted or identifying with any of your experiences, any judgments, any past memories or future planning, or assessing how you're doing right now, or trying to figure it out, or judging yourself, or whatever is happening, just remind yourself in a gentle, loving way, this is not myself, this is not mine, this is not me. It's not myself, it's not mine, it's not me. Not mine, not myself, not me. So whatever is coming up, as you deepen your practice, anytime you feel like you're getting stuck or getting really excited about something, kind of stuck with how great I am doing, or feeling really down that I feel really sleepy and distracted and I'm such a bad meditator or something, just go, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself. This experience is not me, does not define who I am, does not define my worth, none of that. Because it's not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. Whatever's happening, it's not mine. It's not me, it's not myself. So you just keep practicing your technique, and anytime this feels useful, just bring it up. Change your relationship to your experience by just remembering, if I'm feeling body pain, I can go, this body is not mine, is not me, is not myself. If I'm distracted, I can go, this distraction is not me, is not mine, is not myself. If I'm thinking of negative thoughts, it's okay, it's not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. I can just go back to my technique, just do this thing, because whatever's happening is not mine, not me, and not myself. So we've introduced a lot of tools, perhaps too many, but so one tool was taking on the identity of being a master meditator. And as a master meditator, you know what you're doing. So whatever's happening, it's just whatever your edge is in your practice, and it's fine. You're doing a good job. Another tool is taking on the spiritual view as a practice. Whatever your experience is, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're hearing, whatever you're seeing, it's not you, it's not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. You're just reminding yourself continuously of this is not mine, this is not me, it's not myself. And somehow practicing that view lets us concentrate more, getting less engrossed in any particular experience and going more into this experience. Another tool was just taking on the intention of really loving whatever your object is. All of us as a child got lost in wonder and awe playing with a cardboard box or a piece of tissue paper. Somewhere deep down, we all know how to do that. So we just give that child part of ourselves permission to come out at its own pace if it wants, to just really love and pay attention to whatever you're putting your focus on. Final tool is just surrender. Just choose an object and just surrender to whatever that experience is. Let go of any expectations or thoughts about what's supposed to happen, and just lose, surrender, let go, let your object win. That object has your attention, and just for these few minutes, give that object your consciousness. It's not mine, it's my object's. And just surrender to that object fully. And see what happens. And you do that by just setting the intention, telling your body, telling your mind, I'm just going to let this carpet have my full attention. And just watch what happens. Pay attention. You don't need to force it. You don't need to judge it. Just set the intention. Just going to surrender to this sound, to this breath, to this carpet. And you might have to reset that intention 10 times, 100 times, 1,000,000 times, whatever works for you. Nice job, everyone. Now is the group time to share any reports, reflections, questions about the evening or just in general, which everything's fair game. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Peter. That was great. When you were in your talk, you were talking about people when they come and say they're going to freak out in meditation. And I used to get that when I first started to meditate. I haven't had it in a long time. I didn't get it at my first silent retreat. And Soryu gave me a good technique for it. And today I did a float in a sensory deprivation tank. And I got it. I got that freak out feeling. I mean, it's really, has anybody ever done it? You lose sense of your body. I mean, it's just like you're weightless, you're not there. And I didn't like it at all. But of course I tried the meditation techniques. And usually I can get myself comfortable, but I couldn't get myself comfortable. I mean, I stayed there, but I couldn't get myself comfortable. So, I mean, should I do it again? Or should I just chalk it up and say, that's not for me? I mean, is this like a barrier that, I mean, it's supposed to be like, it's supposed to be kind of like a tool for meditation. That's one of the reasons people do it. That's why I was interested.
Yeah. Well, the safe answer is consult your doctor, but I can give you my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess on one hand, I didn't want to make it pejorative that like freakout's necessarily a bad thing.
No.
Sometimes that's the experience to have, and that's okay. The story often emphasizes that I'm sure you've heard a few times now is it's less about what's happening, it's less about what thoughts and feelings are coming up, and it's more about how do I respond? How am I responding? And so it seems perfectly sensible and realistic that if, I've never done a float tank, but I could imagine if I lost all sense of my body that some deep part of me would be scared and start freaking out. Might have some anxiety or panic about that. And in one direction, I could judge myself and go, well, I'm a really crappy meditator that I knew this was going to happen, and yet somehow I let it happen or something. Another way to look at it was just, this is the experience I'm having now, and the ego, the conscious mind, this part of myself that talks to this other part of myself, its job is not to judge what my body is doing. Its job is not to evaluate me being a good or bad person. Its job is just to coach me on, hey, why don't you try a technique right now? Feel flow or something, or hear out, or whatever the technique is. Cultivate rest, cultivate compassion, whatever the thing is. How do I respond here? I don't know if, it's not like all of us have enough pain and suffering in our lives, so I wouldn't ever recommend people intentionally cultivate that or go to places that are like pretty consistently terrible for us, and we know that for a fact. But on the other hand, if it's a measured dose and it's a trustworthy place and I know it's going to end in 20 minutes, maybe it's worth trying it out. I think it's easy in meditation or in this practice of circling that I do, that we often fixate on. We're supposed to have negative experiences and then work with that to make them positive or something. And what's real is like the sad things, which I think is a bias that's not healthy. So I'm definitely not encouraging anyone to intentionally go to places where you're panicked or anxious or scared and use mindfulness to fix that or something. I think we have enough stuff. We can just use mindfulness for what we already got. That's good. On the other hand, like you said, it could be a training tool. Maybe this is a safe place that's time-bound, that I'm in control of, that I can go into this state that's normally not accessible, or if it is accessible, it's usually in dangerous conditions or something, to just test it out, see what happens. And something I didn't mention in my talk, but a lot of different traditions, and these days psychology talks about a lot about these two selves. This ego, conscious mind self, and then this other self, this unconscious, subconscious, automatic, body, whatever, patterning self. I could almost think of it as like a horse rider and a horse, or elephant rider and an elephant. I sometimes, when I teach, use a car metaphor of like, who is driving? I think I took this from someone actually, but I don't remember who. But thank you, whoever gave me this metaphor. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I like the horse metaphor better. But his metaphor was there's a car, and who's driving the car? And when I'm driving the car, there's oftentimes these background drivers, backseat drivers. Is that the right term? Backseat drivers are telling me, hey, you should stop meditating, or hey, you should focus on this, or whatever. And the question isn't judging myself for having backseat drivers. The question isn't judging my horse or my car for, not going as fast as I wanted to or something. My job is just to be in the driver's seat and just set the direction, the intention, and then just see what happens. I have some control, but not a lot. Not a lot of control. I have some control, but not a lot. And so whatever's happening, if the horse is freaking out, my job is just to be with the horse and it's okay. It's all right. Calm it down. We're going to do something to go on a steady, nice pace and not let someone else go ride the horse that's just going to make things worse or something. So most of my answers, there's pros and cons, and you can see a lot of benefits. And at the same time, I want to temper that I am never advocating to intentionally always go to negative experiences. Sometimes I feel like it's the bias that somehow people get doing the spiritual path. I'm interested. I like that. I'm curious if
Well, I gotta go back. I mean, I will, because it was tolerable, but it was just like I'm used to with meditation technique to be able to, sort of talk myself down. And I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the question: is like how high is the challenge, and how far do I push my horse ability or something? And it's interesting because a lot of times when we're forced in situations where we can't get out, I find a lot of times that's where we have breakthroughs. Like we're actually capable of doing a lot more than we think we are. And a lot of times when we're put in the position where we have to practice, is where it really happens. My personal bias, unscientific intuition is that the people, the really awakened teachers I've met are the ones that have usually put themselves in a position, either life or they themselves intentionally put themselves in a position where they had the breakthrough. So either they like went through a lot of suffering or death or illness or sickness, or in some people's case that some of you might know, this person just intentionally put themselves in a position where they sort of like do or die, and so they did it. And so now, of course, again, caveat of not intentionally saying to throw yourselves in negative experiences, because I think we have enough stuff in our life, but to whatever level of our maturity that we can have our own sense of whether or not we can handle something or not, and then do it whatever seems reasonable, and push your edge just a little bit. So I think you know. I think you would know. I trust you. The horse side of you that knows. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really enjoy coming here because 9 times out of 10 I walk away with some really significant insight for me, or some takeaway. And today it was the technique of this is not me, it's not mine. I find it just came up on several levels for me during that second part of the meditation. I think I find it relatively easy to kind of let awareness of myself go. But those words really resounded because when my kids were teenagers, I thought I was going to die and not be able to deal with it. And at some point it was kind of those words. It's like they are not, they are not me.
Right.
They are not mine.
Yeah.
And they have their path to go on. And
Right.
somehow
Yeah.
I got through it.
Yeah.
And, have perfectly wonderful adult children now. But then it also seems like it's more challenging when to say this is not me and this is not mine, when it's somebody else assigning my role to me and perceiving me in a certain way that I don't want to be. And then even harder is to look at other people and extend them the courtesy of, that's not you, that's
Right.
not yours.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you get to in the metta, and you're supposed to be offering loving kindness to people that are difficult, that you are
Yeah.
drawn to, that maybe now in a position of authority
Yeah.
as head of this country, and you still need to say, I'm offering you loving kindness, may you be happy. And so I will, that's what I'll take away this week, is how am I going to work on that piece of offering this, this is not me, and it's not you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That comes up often for me where people, it touches something I talked about in the talk about, like being wanted but not needed. And a lot of times people, or my perception I should say, my perception is that people needing things from me and needing to, better example would be I see a conflict in the community or a potential problem in the community, and my instinct is to always just go fix it or help or something. Sometimes even when I'm exhausted and I don't have, it's too much to do. And so I have to remind myself, their problem is not mine, it's not me, it's not myself. And then, like you said, flipping the perception of them, of not thinking the other person is evil or incompetent or intentionally malicious or something, and going, those perceptions I'm having of them is not actually them, it's not theirs, it's not who they are. Most likely I'm not getting all the information, and they're trying the best that they're trying. And so it's interesting how like so much my environment we take on as like this is somehow me or somehow gonna define who I am or something. And just I actually took this from, well, this is like a Buddhism 101 view of not identifying with anything. And also there's a specific teacher, Rob Burbeo, that emphasizes all these spiritual truths we can take on as a way of seeing, sort of like a fake it till you make it sort of practice of. And in any tradition, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism, Taoism, whatever it is, you just take on the view, the truth that they're expounding, and take it as a practice of seeing it that way. And I found it really powerful and helpful I don't have to wait for that realization to happen in my life. I can just sort of, let's just try it on and see what happens. Like you said, oftentimes it's really helpful to whatever degree, extent that it works for me. It's very powerful. Thanks for sharing that.
What came up for me was when you asked us to continue with one object and try another.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the body healing
Mm-hmm.
and the internal hearing in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more like a body sensation. When I did those two objects,
Mm-hmm.
I had the concentration doubled.
Hmm.
It was much easier
Oh.
to concentrate
Oh,
and
interesting.
focus. When I stopped that, it kind of was less intense. I hadn't tried that before. It was very interesting.
We're doing both simultaneously.
Yeah.
Oh,
Didn't
good.
you ask us?
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
So it was the inner hearing, but it was more like the body hearing. It's hearing of here,
Mm-hmm.
and then the body sensation. So the two things very strong.
Hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've never tried the inner hearing as a. Usually, my go-to method is I do see out, hear out, feel out, as a way sort of to ground myself, anchor myself out of myself, out of my self talking and feeling and everything. But that's just what I do. So it's fascinating to hear that
Both, yeah.
that works as well. Yeah. I have a lot of theories on why that works, but
What?
I don't know if that's true or not. But
What did you say?
I have a lot of theories on why it works to combine multiple ones
Well,
together.
Let's hear one of them.
But okay. I always feel bad. I always mention circling, and I know not everyone's tried it, so it's hard to feel bad if you don't know what I'm talking about. But I like to use an example. You can try it at home when you go home. Just find someone. And so when we do circling, a lot of times we do like face-to-face dyads where you're looking one-on-one with someone. And a lot of times for people, you get like instant concentration. It's a really easy way to get concentrated. And my sense is because we're like evolutionarily programmed to really pay attention to other people. And there's a lot of information before anyone even speaks, just the way their body posture is, the way their facial tension muscles are, how they're breathing. There's just so much data points that our horse knows on some subconscious level what's going on, and we think it's really important. It's really important to be able to read other people because they're, for survival and procreation and being able to work well in teams and everything. It's really important to be able to read each other So we have that already programmed. It's harder to like listen to this heater because we're not evolutionarily programmed to care what the heater sounds like necessarily. And in fact, we often are scanning for other dangers like tigers or something else that's going to get us. Which is why I said that other technique of try to really love whatever you're paying attention to, because it's usually easy to concentrate on what you actually love. And so when you add multiple senses, you're adding more data. And for some reason, my consciousness, if there's more there, it's less bored. And if you just focus on one sense organ, like hearing, you can actually get a lot more and more and more data. But it's hard because we're programmed, like my programming is I don't care what that sounds like normally. But you can sort of trick your mind into caring. And then there's more and more data. But you can also just add multiple dimensions, seeing, hearing, feeling, and then the novelty factor of a lot of different data coming up, a lot of different experiences coming up, helps me stay concentrated on what's going on. It's how like television works in movies. There's always movement and stuff. I used to study like social psychology, and a nice little trick when I'm in group conversations and I want to talk, or I need to say I want to leave now and people are like really chatting and I don't want to like butt in and stop the conversation, is you just use movement. You just move your hands somehow that's not offensive, and everyone looks at your hands and they'll stop talking usually. So it's 4 people talking. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, there you go. That is true. There you go. That's exactly perfect. So it's like 10 people talking. You just go or something, and everyone goes. They all look at that and they go, "Oh, what's going on?" So that's how movies. That's like children's television. There's always movement and crap happening.
It's true.
No, it's a good one. Oh. Because sometimes, something goes on and
Yeah, exactly.
no, and you don't quite know what to do with that.
Yeah, I just need to say, hey, I'm leaving right now. I need to use the bathroom or something. You know, and I don't want to say, hey, I need to use the bathroom. So, whatever. Any movement really just doesn't, as long as it's not offensive.
I think why some people don't say much because they're so visually oriented, they're watching the movements of the speaker.
Maybe, yeah.
You move a lot, your head.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I watch you as much as I listen to you.
Oh. See, that's a data point I never thought of before. So that's really interesting.
I had the same
Research that.
same thing as you. And
Yeah.
I didn't have something else, but I have that same, and that makes sense to me, the novelty factor. And I have 2 things to focus on. It makes it a lot easier for me, and I can meditate easier.
Yeah. I was hanging out with my nephew and niece, and they're watching like a children's television show. There's so much, like, Mr. Rogers was against this. He was like, children's television is destroying kids' brains. There's always these loud noises and movements and crazy things happening all the time. So he was like deliberately slow. He would very slowly take off his shoes, put on his sweater, very boring pace, normal life pace of life, rather than this constant movement of ADHD kind of thing going on. So the sort of like training our minds, how do we stay interested even in, I was paying a lot of attention to that sound of the heater or looking at this carpet, and you can train your mind to be super interested in the carpet or the sounds or anything. It's a practice. So.
And there's value in that. That's a question. And there's value in that.
Totally. Never bored then. Always never bored. You can always find something interesting to pay attention to. Most of our bodies, but that's a whole other talk. Maybe last question? Or, yeah.
Just because I brought a rock, I always have a rock with me, so that is my second.
Oh.
I can't focus on my breathing. I have a rock in my hand, somehow that's
You
my
just
second
feel the
thing.
rock. Oh, cool.
'Cause I like rocks. So
Yeah.
it gives me something tangible.
I don't know why the image that came to my mind was like rosaries or mala beads. Nice.
What's that?
Those like those
Oh,
beads.
the mala.
Yeah, sort of always. I used to have them. I was always thumb through them whenever just have idle time or something. And my grandmother would pray always whenever she had spare moments and just.
Kind of brought me back to my rosary days of my youth.
Yeah, there you go.
Found this on the ground.
Yeah, so wonderful. We should all have a rock or something to pay attention to. Any last ones, or should we close it out here? Great.
I have just a comment about just how hard it is to
Please.
use language to describe self or no self.
Hmm.
You know, it's like almost impossible at times.
Yeah.
Formulate a sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. Language is a poor substitute for reality. That's why in Zen they always talk about fingers pointing to the moon, you know? Don't get lost with the finger. We're just trying to point you to the actual experience. You know?
Who was the Buddhist teacher that you mentioned earlier? Talking about, now I've lost it. You mentioned that he had a meditation technique. You mentioned someone, yeah?
During the Q&A or during the talk or
During the Q&A.
during the Q&A? It might have been Rob Burbea.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Rob Burbea?
Yeah, he has a book called Ways of Seeing. I think it's Way of Seeing.
Okay.
He's a UK, I think a UK-based insight teacher.
I think it's called Seeing That Freeze, but we had this debate yesterday.
Yeah, maybe it's Seeing That Freeze. I don't
Seeing what?
know. Seeing That Freeze?
Seeing That Freeze.
Yeah.
Breeze?
Seeing That Freeze.
If you go to,
That freeze?
Yeah.
Seeing
which freeze
that
you meant.
freeze.
yeah.
Seeing that freeze.
He has like dozens, probably hundreds of Dharma talks online for free too, if you want to.
That freeze?
Yeah.
Frees.
Oh, seeing that freeze. Oh, yeah.
I know we're in Vermont.
Seeing that freeze.
Freeze!
Yeah.
Oh, seeing that freeze.
That's a beautiful epiphany.
And I have one more question then. You know, all this hand movement,
Mhm.
do you do mudras?
If I do what? Mudras? No.
No.
I was trying to think if I've ever done
But
it.
that's another direction for the hand movements because
Mhm.
it's communicates something deeper.
Yeah,
So we should all be looking into that.
yeah,
Find somebody who does it.
yeah. I have many things to follow up on now. I like this.